Well, hey, good morning. How are we doing this morning? All right, come on, 8 a.m. I know, we'll get that coffee in. It's coming, all right? Hey, glad you're here today. My name is Chris Cummings. I'm the lead pastor here at Doxa. And if today is your first day with us, man, we're really glad that you're here. Thank you for trusting us with your Sunday morning. We recognize that there are thousands of things that you could be doing right now. And so thank you for gathering with us today. We do hope and we do pray that this place can feel like home for you very easily. On your way in, you should have received a program. Looks like this. On one side is a list of announcements if you just want to see what's coming up in the life of our church. At the bottom of that section is a little connect card. And if today is your first day with us, or if you're new to Doxa, we would just love the opportunity to connect with you and to help you get connected as well. And one of the best ways for us to be able to do that is for you to fill out that card. Once you fill it out, you can do one of two things with it. You can either put in the offering baskets when they get passed later on in the service, or you can take it to our connections lobby, right when you first walk in. That's where our team will be after the service is over, and we would just love, again, a chance to meet you, introduce ourselves to you, and then also just give you a gift, say thank you for being with us today. So again, we're so glad that you're here. Today, as we gather together, we are kicking off a brand new series focusing on this concept and idea of generosity. Okay? And as I say, we're jumping into a series on generosity. I know for some of us, we might squirm a little bit in that regard. And as we jump into this, what I want to do first is I want to give you the reason why we're stepping into this. You see, for some of us, when we hear that we're jumping into a generosity series, for some of us, this is where our mind goes. We're thinking, hey, this is just the church's way of trying to get some more money for themselves from us. Like, that's just where our mind runs to. It's this cash grab kind of thing, okay? And let me just tell you this straight up, that is not the reason why we are doing this, okay? In fact, for complete, total transparency, Doxa's financial position at this point in time is doing incredibly well, okay? Let me just throw you up a slide with some numbers on it so that you can see what we're seeing behind the scenes and get a clear understanding. Okay, this is just transparency of our finances. What you can see from this graphic is our fiscal year at Doxa starts August 1st into the end of July, okay? So with just the first 5 months of our fiscal year, this church internally has already given over $240,000 to Doxa, okay? That is incredible, okay? Now, as a church plant, so you know how our finances work here, okay? As a church plant, we're about a year and a half old right now. We rely on both internal funding, that's the gifts that you guys give to this church, as well as external funding. So other churches, other organizations and networks, all that kind of stuff. Whenever we went to go plant Doxa, we created a 5-year-long runway to become financially autonomous, okay? We are currently in year 3 of that financial plan, okay? And what you can see, put that graphic back on, what you can see from this graphic is so far for this year, 67% of annual budgeted income has already come in the first 5 months. That's wild. We haven't even calculated January yet, which means we're gonna be well over 70% of internal funding having already come in. Not only that, but if we keep this trajectory to where we're headed, what we will find is that this year, not 2 years from now, this year, we will not need any external funding. We will be able to support ourselves 100% internally. That is incredible. So can we just praise God for that? He has blessed this church in some really profound and amazing ways, okay? And so please hear me. The reason we're doing this series is not because we want something from you. Please hear that, okay? The reason we're doing this series is because we want something for you. You see, the reality for every single one of us is that when it comes to our lives, we all want to be generous people, don't we? We want to be generous. When it comes to the desire when it comes to wanting to be generous or being known for greed, we would all pick, I want to be known for generosity. I want to be a generous person. But here's the reality of our hearts. The default state of our heart is that we will always drift towards greed, no one drifts towards generosity. No one. And we see this really young in our lives, really early in our lives. Like whenever toddlers are learning their first few words, okay? One of the first few words that every toddler learns is the word mine, right? And from a young age, they're starting to become possessive over things. This is mine, that is mine. Even things that aren't theirs, they're like, no, that's mine, right? And the same can be true of us. When we're parenting our kids, no parent has to teach their kid how to be possessive. We're always teaching our kids how to share, how to be generous, because no one drifts towards generosity. Every person drifts towards greed, every single one of us. And you would think that when we get older and we have more resources and we have more things, that we would become more generous. But here's the reality. The reality is that the more that we gain, the tighter we grip. And we hold on to these things tighter and tighter and tighter. And here's just the reality. As we hold so tightly to those things, what that means for us is that we're not holding tightly to God himself, and that there's something in our lives that we're beginning to worship far more than worshiping the God of the universe. And so what we're gonna do over the next 5 weeks is we're gonna jump into this series on generosity and just talk about what does it look like to be generous. And for many of us, when it comes to surrendering our lives before Jesus, man, one of the last things that we do is we surrender our finances before him. And so we're gonna spend 5 weeks in this series. Typically at Doxa, the way that we preach and teach is typically what's referred to as expository preaching, which means we take passages of the Bible and we just walk kind of verse by verse through them. Usually how that lays out for us is by taking books of the Bible and walking through that little by little. And so if you've been here at Doxa for a while, you know we've walked through the book of Jonah, through the book of Ephesians, through Mark, through Psalms, through Nehemiah. In fact, once we're done with this series, we're gonna spend, no lie, 20 plus weeks walking through the book of Hebrews. We're gonna start in March. We're not gonna finish until August, okay? We're gonna spend 20 plus weeks walking through the book of Hebrews. But what we're gonna do before we get there is we're gonna focus our attention on this series in generosity, and we're gonna continue to walk through passages of scripture little by little, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on Jesus's teachings on generosity. You see, when it comes to Jesus and his earthly ministry, whenever he would teach, one of the most popular things that he would teach on is that on generosity. And the reason why is because Jesus knows that generosity or that greed has this way of gripping our hearts. And that in order to truly surrender ourselves before him, we have to move towards generosity. And so every week in this series, we're gonna focus on a different teaching of Jesus, and as he begins to teach us what it means to truly be generous and to lay everything down at the feet of King Jesus. And that's what we're gonna do today. And so if you have a Bible with you, go ahead and open up to the book of Luke. We're gonna be in chapter 12 together today, looking at verses 13 through 21. If you don't have a Bible with you, don't worry, we'll have the verses on the screen behind me. And if you don't own a Bible, we'd love to give you one. You can visit our hospitality kiosk or our connections lobby and grab a free copy before you leave today. Luke chapter 12, we're gonna start in verse 13. And as you're turning there, here's what we're seeing in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus at this moment is with his disciples. He's teaching his disciples. So they're kind of huddled around Jesus, listening to his teaching. But as he's teaching his disciples, there's this crowd that comes up and really kind of engulfs the disciples in Jesus, just to listen to the teachings of Jesus. So he's teaching his disciples, but there are thousands of people that are listening to whatever Jesus is teaching them in this moment. And as Jesus is teaching, all of a sudden from the crowd, there comes this interruption. And that's what we see in verse 13. It says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge and arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." As Jesus is teaching his disciples with thousands of people listening on, all of a sudden in the midst of this moment, there comes this unexpected interruption. Someone comes in with a concern, and what we see is that concern that they bring to Jesus is the concern of their inheritance, or specifically in this regard, the lack of their inheritance. Now, as we dive into this, one thing you need to know real quick is how inheritance worked in the Bible. And what we see throughout the Old Testament is that God instructs the nation of Israel with very specific ways to divide up inheritance. And the way that that worked was that if you were a father and you passed away and you had sons, your inheritance was divided amongst your sons. But the thing is that it wasn't divided equally. See, the firstborn son received what was called a double portion, okay? So if you had 3 sons, the way it would work is you would divide it up amongst in 4 different portions. The first son would get 2 of those portions, while the other 2 sons would each get a portion each. It was a double portion in comparison to everyone else. And what we see here in this passage is it seems like the reason why this brother is complaining to Jesus is not because his brother is cheating him out of inheritance. That's not what it seems like. It's not as if somehow he's not getting what is truly owed to him. What seems to be happening here is that his heart is bent towards greed, and that what he wants is he wants more than what he is actually receiving in this moment. And so he comes up to Jesus, interrupts the teaching, brings this concern to Christ, and his hope in doing so is that Jesus will use his authority to rule on his behalf so that he can gain and get even more. But notice that Jesus doesn't do this at all. Jesus is like, hey, I'm not gonna be the judge here. Instead, what Jesus does is he warns him of the deceitfulness of greed. And the reality is that when it comes to greed, greed can be incredibly deceitful. It's incredibly sneaky. Because here's what greed does, okay? Greed, first and foremost, it preys on something that would otherwise be considered good. You see, money's not a bad thing. The desire for money, I would also say, is not a bad thing by itself. It's a good thing. In fact, people that have a lot of money can do a lot of good with that money. Money can be a good thing. But what greed does is it takes something good and it whispers in our ear and it says, hey, if you just had like a little bit more, man, then you'd be happy. Like if you just had a little bit more money, then your heart would be satisfied. Or if you were just in a little bit of a bigger house, or if you had that car or whatever it is, if you just got your hands on that one thing, then you would truly be happy. Then your soul would be satisfied. What greed does is it preys on things that would otherwise be good, and it tries to turn them into a god. That's what it does. And what Jesus does here is he tells this man that, hey, what greed is whispering in your ear will actually not satisfy you. I mean, he tells him life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. In other words, hey, I know that you think if you get a little bit more, then you'll be happy. But what Jesus is saying is you won't. That greed makes these promises of satisfaction, but it can never actually deliver on the promise. And here's the thing, once we actually gain what we're wanting to get, what do we discover? All we really discover is just how bottomless this pit really is. Because it doesn't truly satisfy the deep longings of our soul. See, what greed does is it's like dangles this nice carrot in front of us. And it tells us, hey, like if you just get this one thing, then you'll be good, then you'll be content, then you can stop chasing, then you'll be happy and satisfied. And then we go running after that thing and we grab that thing, and what do we discover? That right behind that carrot is another carrot dangling in front of us. And another one, and another one, and another one. And one step at a time, what greed is doing is it's luring us away from where true life is found and on the path towards destruction. That's where it leads us. I mean, just think about what's happening here at this moment, right? Jesus with his disciples, this brother interrupts, and he has this complaint and this concern about inheritance. Why is he talking about inheritance? It's because his dad just died. The whole reason why inheritance is popping up is because his father just died. And in this moment, instead of mourning with each other or consoling each other, they are confronting each other and fighting with each other. Because what greed does is it distorts things.
it distorts things where we don't see what truly matters in these moments and where life is truly found. And it leads us on a path away from life and towards destruction, little by little, even without us knowing it. And what Jesus does here is he warns him of the reality of greed. And in order to really emphasize his warning, he tells them a parable. And this is what he says in verse 16. Because then he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. As Jesus further kind of emphasizes his point and this warning, he gives us this parable. And in this parable, what we see is that this man who's already wealthy, so he already has like a big field, that apparently in this harvest season, that field produces an abundance of crops. So much so that the barns that he's already built to store those crops are overflowing. He's got too much for the barns. And what this man decides to do in this moment is instead of taking the excess of what he has and distributing it and being generous with it, what he does is he uses his wealth to store his wealth. And he tears down his barns and he builds far bigger barns in its place so that he can store all of the goods that he now has. And as we see this unfold, what I need you to first understand here is that what this parable is not telling us is that it is a bad thing to save. That's not it, okay? Disclaimer, this parable is not telling us that saving for the future is a bad thing. That's not it, okay? In fact, the scriptures clearly tells us that saving for the future is a wise thing for us to do, okay? You can look at Proverbs chapter 21, for example, which says, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling. In other words, they've been saved, but a foolish man devours it. It is wise to save, okay? You should have a 401k, all right? You should save for your children's college education fund. You should save to buy your first house instead of continuing to rent. It is a good, godly, biblical principle to save. What this parable is not telling us is don't save. That's not a wise thing to do. And so what is this parable telling us? It's telling us not to put our faith in temporary goods rather than the eternal God. And that's what this man is doing. He's saved so much, built bigger barns for all these things. He's saved it all up and he's putting his trust where? In what he's got. It tells us that he says to himself, I've got ample goods. I've got plenty. It's saved up for many years. And so what does he do? He says, I'm gonna relax, I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna be merry. His faith in this moment is not in the God of the harvest. His faith in this moment is in the harvest. It's in his own strength. It's in his own wealth that he puts his trust and he puts his faith in. And as this parable ends, Jesus tells him that what he has done has now become wasted. Look at verse 20 and 21. It says, but God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. As this parable ends, what Jesus does is he sees the actions of this man and how he's saved up and how he's put his faith in what he had rather than the eternal God. And what Jesus does is he does not commend the man for his saving. What he does is he rebukes the man and he says, you have become a fool in light of this. But what he has done is not wisdom. What he has done was foolish. And now what we see on the tail end of this parable is that his wealth has now become a waste. And not only has his wealth become a waste, but his life along with it. You see, the great danger, the great tragedy when it comes to greed is that greed can easily convince us to fill our days striving after things that will never, ever last. That's the great tragedy. And what Jesus does at the end of this parable is he looks at the man in the parable and he says, you wasted your wealth. But not only does he waste his wealth, but he wasted his life. Because what did he spend his life doing? Obtaining wealth. Just trying to get more. Building bigger barns to fill it all up. He spent his whole days chasing after something that doesn't last. And the reality is that for us, we can easily find ourselves in the exact same position where we spend our days not investing in eternity and chasing after eternal things, but we spend our days chasing after things that won't actually last. And so here's the reality with greed, is that as we pursue greed, here's the thing, we will never receive what greed promises to give us, which is life and the fullness of joy. We will never get it when we pursue after greed. The only guarantee when we pursue after greed is simply this, and it's not good. It's that you will waste your life. You will waste it chasing after things that cannot last. And what Jesus does in this moment is as he's lamenting on this man's wasted life, in the same breath, what he also does is he tells us how not to waste ours. And the way he tells us, he says that the only antidote to greed is with radical generosity. It is to be rich towards God. What does it mean to be rich towards God? It means that God is our greatest treasure, that he is our greatest prize, that he is our riches, right? It's to know him. And here's the thing, for those of us that pursue radical generosity and they become rich towards God, where he becomes our greatest prize and possession and treasure and everything else falls in line. When we pursue after him in this way, here's the thing, we will then at that point understand and know what it truly means to be actually rich. Look at what it says in 2 Corinthians 8. It says, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich. Well, 2 Corinthians tells us that the God of the universe steps down from the riches of heaven, becomes like us, dwells among us, lives the life that we were meant to live, dies on a cross that was meant for us, rises from the grave, so that by grace through faith in what Christ has done for you and me, we can truly understand what it means to be rich. And here's the thing, that's not a prosperity gospel kind of rich that we're talking about here. It's not the, you want that Mercedes, give more to the church and you'll get that Mercedes kind of perspective. That's not it. What he's talking about here is that it is the richness for those who are in Christ, because what we gain in all of this is we gain more of God. He's our prize. He's our treasure. It's him that we gain. And so the invitation of Jesus is this, to lay down earthly things to hold more tightly to heavenly things, to lay down temporary things to hold more tightly to eternal things. It is the greatest transaction that you will ever possibly make. And here's the reality, for many of us in the room, greed has already gripped our hearts so tightly. And the reality is that the less of ourselves that we surrender to God, the less of God that we will truly know and fully experience. It's as if the more that we let go of these things, loosen our hands on this, the more we have space and capacity to hold more tightly to God. I love the way that Hudson Taylor, Christian missionary in the late 1800s, early 1900s, he says it like this. He says, the real secret to an unsatisfied life lies too often in an unsurrendered will. The more of ourselves that we lay down before him, the more of ourselves we surrender to him, the more of him we get, and the more of him we get to know. And at his right hand are joys and pleasures forevermore. It's whenever you are rich towards God that you truly understand what it means to be rich. Because what we get is we get more of him. And so here's what we want to do in this entire series is we really, as a church, I want us to take a step towards surrender before the Lord. A step more towards generosity so that we can truly know more of him and grab hold to more of him. And here's the way we're gonna do this. If you're sitting on the far left side of your row, there's a basket at the end of that row, okay? If you don't mind grabbing that, we typically use those for offerings, and we're gonna do that here in a minute. But for now, inside of those baskets are a packet that looks like this, okay? And so if you're on the far left side of your row, if you don't mind getting up, grabbing those, and just passing them down. And what I wanna have everyone do is everyone grab one of these, okay? So every single person grab one of these before you leave, okay? In this little booklet, on the cover, it says Generosity at Doxa. In this booklet are two things. One, you get the booklet, and two, you get this little card right here, okay? And what this booklet is just kind of explaining a little bit of what Generosity at Doxa looks like, okay? It just talks a little bit about how we use our money, how we protect ourselves from not abusing that, all that kind of stuff. You can find answers to those questions here inside this booklet. There's also a little devotional guide inside of here for you able to just to walk through on your own as you ask the question, what does it look like for me to take a next step in generosity, okay? And here's what we're asking you to do. What we're asking for you to do is over the next 5 weeks to prayerfully consider what it means to take a next step in generosity. And the first thing that we want you to do is we want you to understand really where are you on this journey of generosity. At Doxa, we created a pathway that we've called a journey of a giver. And we recognize that when it comes to surrendering ourselves before the Lord, that this really is a journey. It doesn't just happen overnight to full surrender, that each one of us are growing in our faith and we're growing in our trust in the Lord. So what we're gonna do is we wanna first identify where am I on this path, and then we wanna encourage you to take a next step. See, for some of you, maybe you've never really trusted God with your resources before. And for you, your first step is to be what we would call an initial giver. And an initial giver, what they're doing is they're just deciding to trust God with their money. They're taking the first step of generosity, laying that down before the Lord, trusting God with what God has given them. Maybe you've been in that sphere for a while. Maybe you've been an initial giver, and we're gonna ask you to prayerfully consider what it means to take the next step of being a consistent giver. And a consistent giver commits to giving regularly. They exercise the discipline of generosity. Maybe this is when you're signing up for online recurring giving to make a habit out of giving. And for some of you, maybe that's where you've been. And for you, we're gonna encourage you to take the next step to become what we would call a priority giver. And a priority giver is someone who gives their first, not their last. Someone who gives, someone who budgets within their budget like a portion of generosity. Maybe it's a percentage. You're giving your first fruits to the Lord. It's a priority for you. If you've been in that lane for a while, your next step is to be what we would call a sacrificial giver. And a sacrificial giver is someone who's really, they're more concerned with what they're not giving. They're saying no to other things, sacrificing other things to give more and say yes to Jesus. And maybe for some of you, maybe your next step is to become what we would call a legacy giver. Someone who is living a radically generous life with all of their resources. Where they're saying, man, my time, my money, my home, everything, Lord, I lay it down to you, asking God for you to do with it however you want to use it. And so here's what we're asking you to do over the course of these next 5 weeks. We're asking you to take a next step in generosity. And what we wanna see happen is we wanna see every single person at Doxa, 100% people in this room, to take that next step. So even if you're in the room and you're like, I'm a college student, Chris, the only thing I have to my name is 1 pack of ramen. And I'm like, I get it, right? But man, I wanna encourage you in this next 5 days to really pray. What does it prayerfully consider? What does it mean to lay these things down before the feet of Jesus? Because here's the thing, if you can learn how to be generous with what little you have now, you'll learn how to continue to do that when God has given you even more in the future. At the end of these 5 weeks, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have what we call Commitment Sunday. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna bring this card back, and on the inside of this card, you can fill it out with what your plan is for generosity. And as a church, what we're going to do is we're going to take a big step together towards generosity and to surrendering ourselves more fully at the feet of Jesus. And if you're someone here in the room and you're like, man, Chris, it feels like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth here. You said at one point that like, you don't want anything from us. Now you're saying that you're filling out this card so that we give to the church. Like, what's going on here? What we want to encourage you to do as well, if that's where you're at and you're like, I'm still a little skeptical here. Once this card is filled out, we're gonna send you emails on how to sign up for these things online. And we're gonna do what we're calling a 90-day generosity challenge. And what that means is we want to encourage you to give for 90 days. And if you check that box, if I want to give for, I want to do the 90-day generosity challenge, what we're going to do is we're going to take every single dollar that's given in that window, and we're going to give it away to other people outside of our church, to other organizations that are doing great work in our city. We're going to give 100% of that away to those people because we really do think that for many of us, there is an idol in our hearts around our finances and around our money. And we're recognizing that we're not experiencing the fullness of what Christ has for us until we lay it all down to him. And so even if you're a little skeptical, I want to encourage you to take that 90-day generosity challenge, and we're going to give 100% of that away to other organizations across our city. But as a church, what we're doing over the next of these 5 weeks is we are really leaning in this time, saying that we don't want to waste our wealth and we don't want to waste our life. And as a church, we are taking a step towards fuller surrender before the Lord so that we can know more of him intimately and deeply, and that through our lives, his kingdom will expand even beyond what we can possibly imagine or fathom. That as a church, we will be a people who are truly rich towards God. Let me pray.